Guys, welcome back to another episode of the Southern U Podcast, where we strive to educate landowners here in the South on all things land related, whether that be wildlife, timber, farm, agricultural practices, all that good stuff. I am joined as always by the man, the myth, the AL Deer legend, Mr. Matt Brock of Habitat First Properties. Matt's excited to be here. Is he here? I can't see him. He's
just part of it.
I see his head.
It's that great camo I'm wearing.
That's right. It is. And Mr. Jeremy Ferguson of Wildlife Consulting Services / Tut Land. He's the consultant / real estate aficionado.
We don't have any hard or any trouble seeing him. So.
Oh, shots fired early. Shots fired early in the show, guys. We're a minute in. Awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed the last episode. Today what we're looking at is summertime herd health for your whitetail populations here in the South.
My favorite topic.
Favorite topic. Yeah, Jeremy has a different name.
Don't do it.
He had a different name
Don't
for this
do
one,
it.
but
Yeah.
it was a
Family friendly.
little PG, so we're calling it summertime herd and health.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows what that means, though.
It is.
We're going to talk about antlers. And lactation.
Okay.
So we're talking about racks and boobies.
Oh my gosh! Why do we have to do that?
So,
Just for you.
That's where we're going with it. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of guys in the South kind of have somewhat of an idea of what to do to try to maximize their herd health and fawn recruitment and all that kind of things. But when you get to the summer months, it's like, you know, we're all antsy. We're all getting ready for deer season to kick off, but we want to maintain.
Too hot.
It's hot right now. It is kind of hard to imagine sitting in a tree right now, but I've done it.
And Matt's already mentioned getting the itch, and
I'm excited. I'm ready to sling an arrow.
wonder if he don't have chiggers or something.
No, I'm covered right now.
Okay, that's why you've got the itch.
Really, the physical itch.
That's right.
Literally,
Because it's way too hot.
yeah, it's hot. I mean, the last 2 days here were brutal, but but anyways, so we're going to consult the two resident biologists here on our panel, the table, whatever we want to call this thing, and we're going to pick their brains and see what we can discuss when it comes to summertime herd health for our deer practices. Question number one here. Gosh, people quit texting me. Question number one here is, what is most important for this time of year when it pertains to antler growth, when we were talking about racks earlier? So summertime, and we are wanting to maximize antler growth for our bucks. What do we need to be concerned with?
This is a loaded question.
Protein.
But I'm going way back.
Okay.
If you want,
They got to be healthy when they come out of the rut.
yeah, you've got to prepare for this time frame by making sure that they make it through fall and winter in good condition.
And that doesn't mean just feeding them corn.
Right.
Nope.
But now that I've said it out loud, we can move on. Okay. We'll talk about protein.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've heard us talk about this a lot on this podcast, and a lot of people want to. Well, I'm not throwing people under the bus, but I think there's a lot of factors that contribute to it. Some people go, I'm just going to go throw out your favorite mineral block or trace mineral or whatever, and slap a Band-Aid on a gaping wound and hope that adds crazy amounts of antler growth. Or it could be, financial. I mean, there's financial, implications there where it's like, look, I'd love to maximize my habitat, but maybe I don't have the money to do, or I don't have the power to. If this is a lease, you're kind of limited in what you can do on a lease as opposed to if you own the land. So there's a lot of factors. I'm not trying to just throw people under the bus or anything like that, but you do kind of need to back up and make sure that the habitat is what it should be, and make sure that they are getting what they need throughout the course of a year. And like Jeremy mentioned earlier, coming out of the rut healthy, not skin and bones, because they will absolutely run themselves to death if
And that,
sex ratios are not in check and those sort of things. So,
and that absolutely comes back to your habitat. I mean,
It's
I hate it.
Yeah, it's understory. It's
habitat first.
Yay.
But it really is, and then
it pains him to say my business name out loud.
It does.
Is it because he wishes he had thought of it first?
Well, I didn't think about it.
It's just because it's related to him. But second, is population, and I'm not going to say population control, but where your population is, whether you've got that sex ratio right, and whether or not you do have too many deer, or, if you got too few a deer, then food shouldn't be a problem. If you got too many deer, it can absolutely be a tremendous problem.
Yep, it's all on herbaceous management. Understory management is the name of the game.
Yep. And I don't, Matt and I never know what the questions are, so we're not teed up. But you can't provide all the protein that these deer, one, utilize, two, need, just in food plots. It's not going to happen.
Right.
You're not going to provide all of it in food plots and feeders.
Can it help?
Yes.
It's a part of the equation.
Sure.
Yes.
Yep.
But you're not going to correct an issue with one or the other.
Right. Planting a food plot and throwing out a few blocks and
yep.
we got it.
And food plot, a summer food plot to me, just in the business and doing what we do, inherently means something totally different than a fall food plot. My mind is, and maybe the terminology needs to be changed a little bit when we're talking. But if I'm talking fall food plots, a lot of the time we're talking kill plots.
Yeah.
Something to attract the deer to and to shoot it,
Annual,
or to at least see it.
Most of the time it's going to be annual forage.
And most of the time they're relatively small.
Right, sure.
But from a summertime food plot, my mind is immediately kind of shifted gears to something that may be planted in a heavy tonnage forage mix like Vitalize, or it could be the mossy oak biologic beans that they've got out, or eagle beans that are forage variety beans that are producing a lot of tons per acre over a significant acreage field.
Yep. And in most of the South, you have to have that. That's a requirement. I've seen so many failures this year. Even though we had a wet spring, it really hadn't been dry and hot until just the last few days.
Sure.
But we've had a relatively wet spring, a lot of vegetative growth, and some of the pea and bean fields that we've planted have just been absolutely destroyed.
Well, the place you helped me plant, we planted Vitalize, which handles browse very well. The deer have absolutely smoked it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I put a fence around my last field, surviving field. I put a fence on it last week.
Yeah.
Just to keep it alive. And I'm not going to let the deer back in until I decide to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a total different subject, but I have found in recent years people think because they're not seeing a lot of deer that they don't have a lot of deer. And they've stopped antlerless harvest or seriously reduced it, and we are now in a population problem in several areas in our state.
Yeah. Well, I know we're kind of harping on the population thing here, but I think it's kind of the same principle. I was listening to another biologist, and I wish that I could remember who it was because I'd like to give him credit, but he was kind of doing like an outdoor, like hands-on seminar type thing, and he was talking about oak stands, and he was trying to explain, like, I believe his numbers were 30% of these oaks at this particular property were producing like 70% of the acre crop. And so what he was trying to explain to people is you can actually thin out some of these and like take some of these trees out and produce more food. And he's like, but people cannot wrap their heads around that. No. It's kind of the same deal with like population control, like with these deer. It's like, oh gosh, I'm not seeing a bunch of deer. I don't want to shoot a doe because then I won't have. And it's like, it's not that. If you will take a few more of these does out and let the bucks that you're trying to grow have the nutrients that they would have eaten, they would have sucked up, then you're going to see, all that they could become, what I mean, all that they're capable of. And I thought it was very interesting because he said, you know, like I've given this speech till I'm blue in the face, and there are people that will argue with me and argue with me and argue with me about, well, if I cut down my oak trees, how am I going to have acorns? It's like, because all of your oaks aren't producing, like 30% of them are.
You remove some of those resource suckers from the equation, and more of those resources are going, and you also improve your understory. So it's a win-win. If you can locate those high production oak trees, protect those trees, remove some of the ones around it, and your the vegetative structure along the forest floor is going to increase, which gives them more browse. That's more food on the table, not less. That's more.
Right.
At critical times when they need it.
Right. And so, I mean, I realize it doesn't really tie in, but like in my world and marketing stuff, you do with your paid advertising, there's what's called split A/B testing, where I run 2 ads, and the only difference is maybe I change the creative element, either the photo or the video that people see, but it's going to the same audience in the same place. The only variable is the visual aspect, and based on which one of these performs the best, there will be one that's declared a winner. Well, then when this one, just say, campaign B is the winner, well, then you kill campaign A and give its budget to B because it's performing better. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same concept. Does better. But anyway, so what about, I know we're getting kind of into the chemistry, I guess, of it a little bit. And is there any particular, mineral type thing? I know that we kind of harp on minerals being a Band-Aid solution, but what's necessary? What do these bucks need to have in order to just be all that they can be?
There's a lot that they need, but the 3 big ones that everybody's always kind of focused on is calcium, phosphorus, and
protein.
There you go.
Yeah. So gotta have protein.
Gotta have those 3 elements. Calcium and phosphorus primarily are going to be derived from what they're eating anyway. So if you've got healthy plants, then they should be getting the calcium and phosphorus they need. A lot of the minerals that are produced out there for deer are high in calcium, high in phosphorus, and generally a fair amount of magnesium. And of course some other things that make them attractive, or some macro and micronutrients, but we're not doing a in-depth on that. That's kind of beyond our expertise, but that's the big ones. And something that a lot of people don't really think about, don't understand, is these native plants are suited for where they're growing. So even if you've got poor soil, those plants are still very nutritious, and because they're adapted there. So a plant on poor soil that's native may be better actually for the deer than something that you're planting that's struggling and doesn't do well with that site.
Gotcha.
So and something I think that people overlook is, why is protein so important? Protein builds muscle and body mass, and the quicker that deer can reach maturity, or fill the structure of the body up, then more of that growth is going to antlers. So if you can get a deer to his peak body weight at 4 years of age rather than 6 years of age, then he's going to start putting more growth to antlers.
Okay.
And that's the purpose behind them wanting deer to be in optimum condition coming out of the rut. If, say, he loses 10% of his body mass during the rut, which is very low, but for comparison purposes, say he loses 10% versus the deer that loses 30%. Well, that deer is not going to put all the extra nutrition into growing antlers until he reaches full potential. So you've got 20% body mass that you've got to make up there before that excess nutrition goes into.
And if he can't make that up between February and April, then
he's
already behind on antler growth.
Yeah,
because more of those resources in those early summer months are going toward restructuring that body.
Right.
And that's why the focus, in recent years has been on, does a late-born fawn ever really catch up?
Yeah.
So he starts out life months behind. That first year, he's obviously not going to catch up because he's a fawn. He doesn't have that ability to catch up at that point. But in, second year, does he have the ability to catch up with body mass of that deer that was born 2 months before him? Generally, it's not likely.
Right.
There's always going to be a lag, and he's going to be behind. I'm sorry, guys. My ear's itching like crazy.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thought. I don't know if I ever thought about that before. But, they're born late, then
That's the difference in your let's face it, in Alabama, most are spikes. You might have little forkies, but that's the difference in your spike and your spike.
Yeah. Right.
Yep, has an awful lot. Because if you'll notice, a lot of those spikes running around that are just barely breaking the hairline, or they may be 1.5, 2 inch spikes, they're
Smaller body
65
size.
to 80 pound deer.
Right.
Whereas when you typically see a 1-year-old buck that's got forks, he's going to be 100 pounds, 115 pounds maybe. You just don't see a lot of large bodied 1-year-old bucks with this on their head.
Yeah. That's
They've had a little more time to put
Get
some
out
antler
there.
growth on.
And so I know you said that kind of calcium, phosphorus, and, of course, protein are kind of the most important. They're getting that primarily from their browse, whatever they're kind of munching on throughout. In the event that your habitat sucks and it sucks, like there's not a whole lot that I can do about this because of whatever limitations it is. You don't own the land, or you're don't have permission to do whatever. Gosh, great. Echo. Sorry, y'all.
Good job, Matt.
I didn't do it.
Look at that empty look. He's like, what?
I didn't do it. I heard it. Was it him?
Yeah, it was him.
Yeah.
What did you do?
You hear him just crap his pants on camera.
That's what that was. I thought it was one of the kids downstairs dropping a pan or something.
Yeah, he dropped something.
Way to go, Jeremy.
Oh, me.
Delayed reaction.
Yeah. But anyway.
But about that, I was saying, do you tell that guy that knows they've got bad habitat, hey, go buy some mineral, or is it still
It's
you got to be helping to some degree.
Do what you can.
Yes.
And what's going to be common in our part of the world is the guys that's running hunting clubs on industrial timberland, that they're in that time period in the pine management regime where it just sucks. Age 7, 8, 9-ish, somewhere in there.
Waiting on that first thin.
Yeah, wait to 15, waiting on that first thin. And then after that first thin, canopy closure is going to come, in another 5 to 7 years. You've got periods where you get canopy closure and things just kind of suck.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just what it is.
And if you have the ability during those periods, say that 5 years after the first thin, things starts to, the crowns are coming together, there's less sunlight hitting the ground. If you can start before it reaches that point and do some type of understory management, if they permit you to do most of them are not going to let you do herbicide applications. Most. You might get special permissions to do that. But if you can do something as simple as just mowing or disking some of the lanes.
Yep.
Because this is what you're doing. You're always going to have that canopy closure, but what you don't have is the mid-story closure. And in a lot of pine stands, that's what ends up taking a lot of your understory vegetation is when the mid-story actually closes up.
Yep.
So if you don't have that hardwood component of gum and poplar and all those things coming up in the mid-story, you can improve the quality of your understory.
Yep. If you will stay on it as soon as it's thinned, you stand a fighting chance. It's when you don't do anything that's tough. And topography limits you too. But one thing that we used to do in some timber stands where we couldn't get anything else, managing some places. Now they were leased land, but I was over the leases, so I could do some things others couldn't. But just your little hard tooth rakes that go on the back of a small tractor. Of course, if you drag them across the stump, it's going to break the tines. But a lot of the small tractors can fit down through there and just rake the straw and the debris off of that, and say do little patches. It's a half acre here and there, and focus on those and keep those clean.
Yeah, or just do strips.
Just long strips or little patches. Just keep those areas clean as best you can. And look, there's not a timber company in the world that's going to get after you for spraying glyphosate.
Right.
But if you get into other chemicals and you start causing a problem in timber stands, then they're likely going to throw you out. But you can keep stuff beat back with glyphosate.
You can.
Around food plots.
So, yeah, doing whatever you can to encourage some growth of some browse.
Growth of something other than a hardwood tree.
Yes.
Being a hickory or sweet gum, generally.
Gotcha. Well, that's cool. I think kind of that question leads into the next. We've talked about bucks. Now let's talk about does for a minute, especially those that have fawns at this point. What is needed for them to, like we were talking about earlier, for fawn recruitment, lactation, those type things? Like, what do they need to ensure that they get the best chance of remaining healthy and raising
really
healthy babies?
The same nutrients.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Nothing really changes.
Nope. That milk production and antler production are the two most stressful things on a whitetail, as far as things that are natural. Obviously, getting shot's pretty stressful.
The rut,
rut's pretty stressful. But as far as on their bodies, that's the two most stressful times for those animals. So really, providing as much quality food as you can is vital.
And there are things you can do in the summer. Okay, so in the springtime, what happens? You have this spring green up, all this lush, succulent vegetation that's sucking up moisture and nutrients from the soil, putting on new growth, and deer hammering it. I mean, and there's so much of it, a lot of times you can't really select what they're eating on because they're just eating everything. And then later on in the summer, you can kind of start to tell, well, they're eating this more than others. Well, it's because it's more palatable or more desirable, maybe meeting their needs at that particular time. So one thing that I've started doing is doing some small patch burning in the summer. You can do June, July burns. And, man, you get that spring flush of vegetation again in the middle of summer. And it makes a big difference. If things are too green to burn through, then you can apply herbicide, kill it back, then burn it.
Yeah, or mow it.
Mow it down. As far as well, we've talked about what landowners can do, or we've talked about what some people can do, but let's just assume that you own the land, that there are no limitations, financial limitations or permissions or anything like that. What would you do starting in the spring? Deer season has ended. Maybe turkey season has, you may be in the middle of turkey season, something like that. What's kind of priority number one starting there? And then just kind of work our way through the summer as far as, if this is your land, you have kind of full control to do whatever you want. What are you trying to do throughout that off season?
I want to burn would be primary. For me, now Jeremy may tell you something different.
Matt's pyro.
Yeah, I'm a pyro. My answer to everything is burn it. What do I do? Burn it, and it'll help. So, if you can burn some in the spring, and I know some of my turkey people are like losing their minds right now.
Die hard against it.
Yeah. The long-term benefits of burning, regardless of the timing, far outweighs the loss of a nest or two. And with that said, I do not encourage large-scale burning in good turkey habitat or nesting habitat in the spring.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm talking about burning places that may very well not be good nesting habitat to begin with.
Okay.
They may be after you get done burning for the following year, but they're not that year. So if you can encourage vegetative growth anytime between March and May, do it. Prescribe fire. Second thing I'm going to work on that time of year is food plots, supplemental plots. They can go a long way. But now one thing I think we're unique. Most of Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, parts of South Carolina, Florida, our deer populations are so high. If you're not planting several acres, you may be wasting your money. Wasting it from the standpoint of you're not going to actually grow a crop to maturity.
Right.
You don't see that in other parts of the country. You can
find it in isolated pockets,
right? But
generally,
in other parts of the country, deer populations are at a level that you can plant smaller acreages in summer plots and do okay. You can't do that in a lot of the South.
Yeah.
So like Jeremy was talking about, fall food plots, good kill plots, smaller acreages are fine. But when I'm thinking of a summer food plot planted in some type of forage for deer, I'm looking at 3 to 5 acres minimum. If you can't reach that, you may not grow a successful plot.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a 1 acre clover field this year in an area that I've killed no less than 15 deer in the last 3 seasons in that one field. And my clover's gone. And by God, it's not stressed from the heat. It's gone because it's nothing but bare stems. They've eaten all the leaves off of and it can't keep up.
Right.
Sounds like somebody to shoot more deer.
I do, Jeremy. I do.
Population problem.
Yep.
I shoot them. Kids shoot them. We
One-
all shoot them.
One thing that he didn't mention is I like to do some, depending on what makeup my native habitat is, and this is fallow field stuff.
Yep.
Is I like to do some late winter disking,
Yep.
some early spring disking, and then some disking kind of later on in the summer to have different flushes
Yes.
of different things. Depending on when you disc, when you burn, you will set back grasses or promote grasses. You'll set back broadleaves or promote broadleaves. So I like to spread the love.
Yes.
know.
And you have to be careful on your timing on that. If you're in an area that was historically agricultural production and you do summer disking, you may get sickle pod and pigweed.
You're gonna get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all those things are going to be there.
Mare's tail.
So if you're in that situation, fall disking is definitely the best option.
Okay.
But, depending on where you are, yeah, a disc is a great tool to use to promote vegetation. Sometimes I use that with fire, disking and then or fire then disc. Just depends on the situation.
Yep.
And so now, just to be totally clear for people like me who aren't not as experienced for sure and don't have the academic side, you're saying I'm just going to go hit some places with a disc at different points in the year because I'm getting different things at different times of the year.
Yes.
I'm promoting growth of different.
Yes,
Okay.
different species and stages of growth.
Gotcha. And I guess because some of those are more beneficial to them, or they just hold up to browse better, or both, or is that?
Well, it's just adding in the diversity. So as you get, it's the same thing with burning in the summertime. You're trying to get a hard, coarse plant or leaf back in an early stage of development where it's tender and more succulent and more palatable.
Right.
That's the whole point of either burning or disking.
Yep. It's just to get them something to eat. Give them something they want to eat, I guess. And I get this is kind of a little bit of a stray hair here, but I was going to ask, as far as something being palatable for deer, do you ever see situations where a deer eats something because they need it nutritionally, or do they or do they eat it because it tastes good and it's more palatable, or will they? I guess what
they
I'm trying
kind
to
of go
say.
hand in hand. So with every study that they've ever conducted, deer select what they eat
The highest quality.
based on the quality and what they need during that time period.
So it's not necessarily
Lactating does know what they need, and that's what they select for.
They have their own little internal lab that tells them what's the most nutritious.
They sure do.
And so you're saying they're going to pick nutrition over palatability for the most part.
Well,
they
they
really
go in hand in hand. The more
Okay.
palatable, generally, the more nutrition's in that associated with it at that time.
Yes.
Like in my head, I'm thinking like, is a deer going to walk across your corn feeder to go pick up some tender native browse, because that's
Depends
more
on the time of year. I know they'll walk through a corn feeder to get to white oak acorns in October.
Right. Because they're awesome.
Their internal lab, as he stated, telling them, I've got to have acorns right now.
I got to have this. Time and time again, research has shown when they're, a lot of it started out as different types of research, but they were showing if you provide unlimited food sources by way of feed, then deer stop eating the lower preferred or slightly preferred foods and only eat the highly preferred vegetation, and then fill the rest with the feed.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
whereas if that feed were not there, they would select
spread it
some of the lower quality vegetation
to fill that gap.
but they don't need to in that scenario.
Okay. Yeah, so like a high fence or something like that.
So in those cases, that's why habitat management is so important, because now you've got these deer that they're selecting the highest quality food that you have available to them. They're filling the gaps with the feed, minerals, and all the others that you're providing for them. And over a period of time doing that, well, they may impact the populations of those plants, because they may prevent them from going to seed, or they may kill the plant totally. And so then, you're left with a degraded habitat. You're left with only the moderately preferred species or the lowly preferred. So then they step down and you're like, why am I losing body condition on my deer?
And I haven't changed anything.
Yep, I've done nothing. Well,
it's a population issue at that point.
Yep, you've actually changed your habitat, and you just aren't aware of it.
Yeah. So in that scenario, it's like the answer is take more deer off of it,
or
I guess,
or improve the habitat, or both. A lot of times it's both.
Yep, work on the habitat, work on the deer.
Gotcha. Which I know we've already touched on this one a little bit, but I was going to see if you guys had anything else you wanted to add there. I've got, what role does supplemental feed or minerals play in this equation? I know we've said before, if your habitat's awful and you're expecting to throw out some blocks and that is a miracle cure, that's not going to work. But assuming that you do have decent habitat and you're actively managing, doing what you can, what role does, just say, supplemental feed and some sort of mineral block or something like that, is that something that you feel like people ought to take a whole lot of, consideration, or is that just kind of a personal preference type thing?
If you've got a limited budget, you would be better off placing your resources into habitat management. If your budget, like some of the clients that we work with, I don't know that they have a budget.
It's reached my goals.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, this is what I want to do. How do I get there? And if there are no financial limitations, then I would say hit habitat first, then let's work on a supplemental feeding program, and you can definitely see some gains. But typically speaking, if you've got poor habitat and you think that I'm just going to go in here and feed some minerals or put out some protein feed, you might – well, Harry Jacobson did a study on this 20, 30 years ago, did he not? Was it like 1 to 2% gain?
About
2% gain. To me, that's not worth the expense. In my mind, I'm not gonna pour a lot of resources into supplemental feeding to have a 140-inch deer get to 143 or 144.
Right.
It's not important. I mean, if I can get him from 140 to 160,
sure,
it may be worth it. But I guess it's a cost-benefit analysis on what you're willing to put up with, and understanding, having realistic expectations of what kind of difference it's going to make. And in most cases, it doesn't make that big of a difference.
Yeah. But if money's no object,
and it depends on what shape everything's in. If your everything is primo from the natural side of things, then you can expect a little better gains.
That's right.
From adding in the minerals, the feeds, and even quote unquote, or getting into the treated feeds where you're introducing dewormers and anti-parasitics and things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of guys out there, because I've even had conversations since we've started this podcast with other people like, hey man, I heard y'all say something on there about about like, I mean, like, well, that can't hurt anything. It's not going to hurt anything. And well, like, no, it's not.
Right.
It's not going to ruin anything.
It's all about having realistic expectations of what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, and I think that you guys have talked about it before of like, what is your goal when putting out something like a corn feeder or putting out a mineral block? Is it to try to spike some kind of crazy amount of growth with what's on their head or their body weight, or is it about taking inventory to see what you have there? If that's the goal, then you know what I mean, then that's a little bit different, because they work for that. They're very attractive in most cases, which of course Matt's deer said they won't touch minerals at his place, but
they don't seem to hit minerals on my place very well. But now I found some apple flavored corn on sale not long ago, and I put some apple flavored corn in front of or on my mineral sites basically, and I'm getting 50 to 70% more bucks than I was prior to that.
Oh, camera?
Yeah, I've had cameras on minerals all summer, and I'm getting a couple bucks a day and a few does, and man, my picks shot up so much. I mean, they're not using the minerals very often, but
they like that sweet corn. They
like that apple flavored corn though. But now the majority of my deer right now are spending time in cutovers or in those vitalized food plots that I planted.
That's where we're getting most of the nutrition this time of year, and I would imagine would probably continue as long as it's there. Now I don't know how, at what point. That may be another conversation for a different for a different episode. But at what point does a summer plot start to die out and it's time to replant, and now this is a fall plot, or
depends
or
on what's there.
Yeah,
I mean, depends on the crop and what your intentions are for it.
Yeah. I feel like that's all the questions I've got, unless you guys know of something that I've just totally skipped over that we need to. Jeremy's got a blank look on his face.
That's not unusual.
No.
As long as you don't start drooling or something,
I've seen it.
No, I think you covered it fairly well. I mean, you could get deep into these subjects pretty easy, but trying to stay at the 30,000-foot level is kind of what we're more about, instead of the dive off into research. And
oh yeah, which I mean, and we at some point could, but
yeah.
I think just for the most part, I think what people are asking, or what people are most interested in, is like, average Joe has some land, has a lease. What can I do to help? Like, what can I do to make this better for my deer and turkeys?
Yeah, and of course, one resource we rarely talk about, but it's vital, is water.
Yeah.
Yep. And we don't talk about it much here because we don't have to worry about it most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
not most of the time.
It's rarely an issue here.
Yep. That's right. And of course, guys, we don't talk about this a ton, but Matt and Jeremy are both biologists. They both have their own consulting businesses, and so if you need help, or you just have kind of some questions about what, when, why, those sort of things, as it pertains to wildlife, you guys feel free to reach out to us via email, info@thesouthernU.com, or feel free to shoot us a DM, Instagram, Facebook, any of that type stuff, and we'll get you hooked up. We've actually done some site visits and some consults with a few people through Instagram, so we're certainly excited about that. And we've got one on the books for South Alabama, and it sounds like a pretty cool project. I think that lower portion of Alabama, and I think it's going to be really cool to get down there and kind of see what all those guys have going on. And
it's going to be hot.
Yeah, it'll be hot.
It's going to be hot today. I've got one as soon as I leave here.
Yep. So, but we certainly appreciate you guys, and what all questions you ask us, and all your comments, good, bad, and ugly. You can tell us how dumb we are, or how awesome it is to have wild hogs on your place or something, right, Matt?
It's good to be told you're an idiot from time to time.
Yeah, I get it. I get it pretty often, so I'm kind of used to it.
Yeah.
I've quit telling Matt that. It just didn't seem to help.
Didn't seem to help.
No.
Same with me. My wife tells me the same thing, and it don't seem to help. Don't improve anything.
Nope.
Thank you guys so much. Like I said, if you need help, give us a shout. We'll be glad to see how we can help you guys with your land and your goals with your property. And if not, that's cool. Really appreciate your support, and we will see you guys on the next one.
Peace out.
See ya.
Out.